As if war in Ukraine, missile attacks, jet fighters screaming overhead and tanks bullying their way through suburban streets wasn't already terrifying enough, now the world must also accept a sobering truth. This is just the beginning. The architect of this catastrophe, Russia's autocratic leader Vladimir Putin, has a master plan that doesn't stop with punishing 44 million Ukrainian citizens. With the collapse of Kyiv, Putin will look elsewhere in Eastern Europe to prove his dominance. And in this very deliberate bid to wreak havoc, he's prepared to damn international law and damn the West. War in Europe was something most people associated with bygone centuries, but here we are in 2022 with missiles raining down.
Oh, that's a missile! That's a missile!
The continent's largest country, Russia, declaring war on the second largest, Ukraine. The operation has been as swift as it has been brutal. Already, hundreds of lives have been lost in this campaign of shock and awe, all because of the expansionist plans of volatile Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I think that everybody should be very scared. We have a truly evil man who is in possession of nuclear warheads. This is a very, very grave and tense situation.
Bill Browder is one of the world's preeminent voices on Russia. That's because he knows firsthand about Putin's disregard for life. You've had personal dealings with Putin. What's he like?
Well, I've been in conflict with Vladimir Putin ever since the Russian regime, the Putin regime, murdered my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, back in 2009. I made it my life's mission to get justice for him. And in the process, I created a law called the Magnitsky Act, which imposes asset freezes and visa sanctions on corrupt officials in the Putin regime. And Putin went out of his mind when this law was passed. And he started chasing me around the world, trying to have me arrested wherever I went so I could be sent back to Russia and killed like my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky.
How would you describe Vladimir Putin's psychological mindset?
So the culture in Russia, in Russian government, in Russian politics, is probably most similar to the culture of prison yard. You can't show any sign of weakness. You can't back down. There's no negotiating. It's win-lose. You know, the strong take the weak. And in Putin's mind, he's got to prove that he's strong. He's got to prove that he's the best, the strongest, the worst, the most vicious, because anything less than that, and he feels like he'll get taken down.
The world has watched on in horror this last week as Russia flexed all of its military muscle in Ukraine. But Bill believes, unfortunately, this is only the beginning of a larger campaign that'll see Putin turn his attention to gaining influence in other countries that used to make up part of the Soviet Union.
I'm sure they're on Putin's radar. And the potential dangers that we face now and going forward are incalculable. And I believe that Putin will just try to challenge and see whether the West, whether the members of NATO are all going to band together, all for one and one for all, to protect Estonia or Lithuania. And I think Putin is banking on the idea that we won't. And that's the big challenge. There may be a moment in the not too distant future when the United States is at war with Russia.
You make it sound like Ukraine is almost just a stepping stone in terms of a larger plot here for Putin.
I'm certain it is. Now, it may not happen in the next week or two. This could be a process that plays out over the next year or two. But I don't see in any way that Ukraine is where Vladimir Putin stops.
It's the beginning of a new chapter, and a last one that will be very dangerous and very unstable.
Michael Kimmage is a former diplomat who used to look after the Russia-Ukraine portfolio for the US State Department. He's now a professor of Russian history at the Catholic University of America, and he's worried about what the next chapter will be. Can you give me the best case and the worst case scenario of how all of this plays out?
Well, the worst case scenario is that the war is not contained to the territory of Ukraine. Begins as a Ukrainian war and becomes a European war. If you want to entertain worst case scenarios, you could go back and look at World War I and World War II and think of them as wars about Ukraine, which to a degree both of them are. Ukraine is pivotal to both of those wars. Its territory, where it fits in various alliance structures, so it's not inconceivable that a kind of World War I type scenario could flow from this. That, I think, is clearly the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is that the fighting ends quickly, but even that is not a very good scenario because that involves either the dismemberment or the Russian domination of Ukraine.
So the best case scenario is still pretty bad.
Looking at things from the perspective of the United States, it's very bad because peace, if it's to be achieved at the moment, will have to be achieved on Russian terms. None of us wants to see this become a wider war, but how do you sort of accept that and just move on? I think that that's exceptionally difficult.
The West is kind of, damned if you do, damned if you don't here, because either on the one hand, they let Russia take Ukraine without anyone stepping in to stop them. But on the other hand, do we want to be going to war with Russia?
I don't think anyone wants to go to war with Russia, but we're not the ones declaring war on Russia. Russia is declaring war on us. They're starting by declaring war on Ukraine. And if they get to Lithuania or Estonia, they'll be declaring war on America, the United Kingdom, Canada, and various other members of NATO. It's a truly scary situation. This wasn't a fight that we've picked, but he's picked the fight.
Does it worry you that someone with that kind of mindset has their finger on the nuclear button?
I'm absolutely terrified every day with that thought. So Vladimir Putin is so immoral and so tactical that if he felt like using a nuclear weapon to retain his power or to defeat an enemy was something that he needed to do, he would do it. He's effectively a mafia boss with nuclear weapons.
Putin has always been renowned as unpredictable and irrational. But since the outbreak of COVID, the president's effectively cut himself off from the outside world, and that has only intensified his paranoia. Has the pandemic changed Putin's mindset?
There are a lot of rumors to this effect. Apparently, he has had a bad pandemic. You see his anxiety about meeting with foreign leaders and the distance and the big tables and all of that. You see an intensification of those conspiracy theories of a paranoid read of the outside world. You see that intensifying in the last couple of years, and the pandemic may well be a contributing factor to that.
While Russia doesn't pose any immediate threat in our region, China most certainly does. Bill Browder cautions that the way the West responds to Russia will actually play a pivotal role in deciding the next geopolitical moves in the Pacific. What does all of this mean for Australia, do you think?
Well, Australia is part of the civilized world. It's part of the community of democracies. And we're in a world now where we're pairing off against the autocracies. And it's not just Russia. China as well. China has come to Russia's aid and defense in this whole thing. And you may not be very close to Russia physically, but you're close to China. And as we deal with these non-democratic countries, all the democratic countries have to stick together. Because without sticking together, we're going to get picked off and destroyed by these countries like Russia and China.
How much do you think China is watching how this is playing out in Ukraine and almost taking notes in terms of what they might do when it comes to Taiwan?
I think that they're watching with an eagle eye the whole situation in Ukraine because Taiwan is an exactly comparable situation. And this is almost a dress rehearsal for what they have cooking up for Taiwan.
In a week where it's been hard to find positives, Bill wants us to remember that for decades, the West's worldview has prevailed in the face of threats from aggressive dictators. He believes while President Putin might like to portray a tough guy image, much of it is bluff and bluster. And in the face of this latest belligerence, we must continue to stand up for what is right.
Having personally been in conflict with Vladimir Putin, the one thing I can say is that he's not all-powerful. We found all sorts of weaknesses and holes, and there's lots of different ways that we can thwart him, disrupt him, and fight him. And so as terrible and as maniacal as he wants us to think he is playing poker with a pair of twos, and we have a full house, and we just need to use it properly.
Hello, I'm Tom Steinfort. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our Extra Minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au, as well as the 9Now app.